Do you believe the dead can send us signs? I didn't. Until that Tuesday at the bakery, when I smelled my mother's perfume, 5 years after losing her. My body froze. My heart raced. And the tears came without permission, in the middle of strangers, because in that moment I knew she was there. But before I tell you what happened that day that changed everything, you need to understand who she was. Because only then will you feel what I felt when that impossible smell crossed time to find me. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about proof that love never dies. And in the next few minutes, you'll discover why sometimes, just sometimes, the universe conspires to show us that no one we love ever truly leaves. Take a deep breath. Because what I'm about to tell you will touch places in your soul you might not even know exist. There's something magical about the way a child sees their mother. It's not just the figure who makes breakfast or fixes your hair before school. It's something much bigger, something that gets imprinted on your soul like a permanent mark. For me, still small, my mother was the very concept of home. She was the smell of cake coming out of the oven on Sundays, she was the voice that calmed me during storms, she was the embrace that turned any fear into courage. Childhood memories have an inexplicable power over us. They're not just visual memories stored in some corner of the mind. They're complete sensory experiences that transport us through time. I can still feel the texture of the checkered apron my mother wore in the kitchen. I can hear the sound of the spoon hitting the pot while she made pancakes. And especially, I can smell that characteristic perfume that mixed lavender with vanilla, a unique combination that only she had. Our house was simple, but full of unconditional love. It was in a quiet neighborhood, one of those where everyone knows each other and doors stay open. The kitchen was the heart of that home. There, Mom spent hours preparing meals with dedication and care. She wasn't just a cook, she was an artist who transformed simple ingredients into eternal memories. Her beans had a different taste, her homemade bread had a special softness, and everything carried that unmistakable smell that defined what it meant to be home. I grew up surrounded by these memories that still move me today. Every morning, before going to school, my mother made coffee with milk just the way I liked it. She always added a pinch of cinnamon, a secret she said she learned from her own mother. It was a chain of love passed from generation to generation, from woman to woman, creating invisible but unbreakable bonds. While drinking my coffee, I watched her movements, the delicate way she stirred the cup, the gentle smile that lit up her face when she noticed I was watching. These everyday moments, apparently simple, built a fortress of emotional connection that I didn't even know would become my greatest treasure. The afternoons were reserved for family stories that Mom loved to tell. Sitting in the rocking chair on the porch, she revisited the past with bright eyes. She talked about my grandmothers, about how they overcame unimaginable difficulties to give their children a better life. She told about the day she met my father, about their first shy meeting at the town square. These narratives weren't just entertainment, they were life lessons disguised as eternal longing. Each story carried a teaching, a message about persistence, love and faith that would be passed from mother to daughter. The relationship between us was built on small daily rituals. Every night, before bed, Mom came to my room for our daily talk. It was a sacred moment where I could talk about anything without fear of judgment. She listened with genuine attention, offering advice with that voice that calms any inner storm. Even when she didn't have answers, her presence was enough. I learned early on that the greatest gift we can give someone is our full attention, our time dedicated exclusively to that person, especially between women of the same family. The kitchen remained the main stage for these memories. On weekends, I helped Mom prepare Sunday lunch. She taught with infinite patience, showing the right consistency for beans, the ideal amount of salt in the seasoning. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about passing on an ancestral feminine legacy. "One day you'll cook for your own family," she'd say with a smile full of hope. "And when you do, you'll remember me." Those words echoed like a sweet prophecy, a promise that my mother's memories would cross time and generations. The perfume Mom wore was called Essence de Fleur, a curiously appropriate name. It was a cheap perfume she bought at the neighborhood store, but it became the trademark of her presence. When I came home from school, even before opening the gate, I could already smell that scent coming from the house. It was like an olfactory lighthouse signaling safety and welcome. Years later, I would discover that simple perfume had more emotional value than any imported fragrance could have. It's amazing how the cheapest things can become the most precious when associated with the right people. Stories about my mother always included her ability to see beauty where others saw only ordinary. She had a small garden in the back of the house, where she grew herbs and some flowers. She spent time there every morning, talking to the plants as if they were old friends. I thought it was funny at first, but later understood that was her way of practicing gratitude. She was thankful for the day beginning, for the family she had, for the simple but meaningful life. This silent practice of appreciating small things shaped how I would see the world forever. Sundays were special for one specific reason: cornmeal cake with guava paste. That was Mom's specialty, a recipe that came from my own grandmother. The process of making that cake was almost ritualistic. She separated the ingredients carefully, measured each portion precisely, mixed everything with smooth, circular movements. The entire house filled with that aroma of baking cornmeal, mixed with the sweetness of melting guava paste. Neighbors would comment that they could smell it from the street. It was impossible not to associate that perfume with happiness, with home, with everything that represented safety and love between mother and daughter. Childhood nostalgia often manifests through the senses. For me, smell was always the most powerful. I don't need to look at photos or watch videos to transport myself back to those golden years. I just close my eyes and remember Mom's smell, the house, Sunday afternoons. Neuroscientists explain that the olfactory system is directly connected to the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotions and memories. That's why smells have this almost magical power to take us instantly to the past. Mom, without knowing anything about neuroscience, had created powerful emotional anchors through her perfumes and recipes. The memories of my youth were all painted with the colors of maternal presence. When I entered adolescence and started having my first internal conflicts, my mother was always there. She didn't try to solve everything for me, but offered compassionate listening. "Life will teach you many lessons," she'd say while preparing the chamomile tea we drank together. "Some will be sweet, others bitter. But all are necessary for you to become who you need to be." These reflections of the soul were offered naturally, without sounding like sermons or forced moral lessons. A mother's unconditional love has unique characteristics. It's not a love that demands perfection or performance. It's a love that accepts, that embraces, that remains firm even when everything around collapses. I tested that love a few times, like every teenager does. I came home with bad grades, committed small rebellions, said harsh words in moments of anger. And every time, I found on the other side the same woman who loved me, who corrected me when necessary, but who never withdrew her affection. "I may not like what you do," she explained, "but I'll never stop loving who you are." The stories of overcoming that Mom told weren't just about other people. She herself had her journey of conquered challenges. She had grown up in a poor family, lost her mother early, needed to work from a very young age. But she never let circumstances define her destiny. She studied at night, saved every penny, built a better life for herself and then for our family. These narratives weren't told with self-pity or seeking recognition. They were shared as evidence that it's possible to flourish even in arid soil, especially as a woman in difficult times. Difficulties don't come to destroy us, she taught, they come to reveal our inner strength. The connection between mother and daughter was fed by rare emotional honesty. Mom didn't pretend to be perfect or have all the answers. When she was sad, she allowed herself to cry. When she was happy, she laughed out loud without worrying about what others would think. She taught me, through example, that feeling emotions deeply isn't weakness, it's humanity. In a society that often demands masks and performances, she offered authenticity. And in that simple home, between the smell of cake and lavender perfume, I was learning lessons that no school could teach. I didn't know it yet, but I was accumulating a treasure of memories that would become my greatest asset when difficult times came. Life has a cruel way of preparing us for goodbyes we'll never be ready to face. It was on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon that Mom called me to sit beside her on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky with those orange and pink tones she always said were God's signature. She held my hand, in that firm but affectionate way only she knew how, and said the words that would change everything, "Honey, I need to tell you something important." In that moment, even before she continued, my heart already knew. There's an intuition that lives in the chest of those who love, a premonition that screams when something is about to break. The diagnosis came like a bolt from the blue. Cancer. That small but devastating word that steals the ground from so many families. The doctors talked about treatments, possibilities, statistics that seemed like numbers too cold to describe my mother's life. She listened to everything with that serenity I always admired, asking practical questions while I fought to hold back tears. On the way back home, she was the one who consoled me, not the other way around. "I've lived a good life," she said looking out the car window. "I raised you, loved your father, had my garden and my kitchen. If it's my time, I'll go in peace." But I wasn't at peace, and never would be. The following months were a roller coaster of emotions oscillating between hope and despair. Mom started treatment with determination, but her body was losing that vitality that always defined her. Her hair fell out, but she joked saying she always wanted to know what she'd look like bald. Her appetite decreased, but she insisted on staying in the kitchen, even if just to guide while I cooked. That lavender and vanilla perfume began to mix with the smell of medicines and hospital. It was as if two realities were colliding, the mother I always knew and this new fragile version that the disease was sculpting. But in her eyes, those deep brown eyes, the same strong woman still shone. It was during this time that I started paying attention to details that previously went unnoticed. The way she folded towels, always in 3 parts. The way she hummed softly while watering the plants in the morning. The habit of running her hand through my hair when she passed behind me. I was afraid, a paralyzing fear of forgetting these things. So I began mentally recording every gesture, every word, every moment. I bought a notebook and started writing, creating an emotional diary that documented not just the facts, but the sensations, the smells, the sounds. It was my desperate way of holding on to time that slipped through my fingers. The conversations between us changed tone. We no longer talked about distant future plans, but about memories and feelings. Mom started telling me stories she had never shared before. About fears she had when I was born, about dreams she gave up, about small regrets she carried silently. "I wish I had traveled more," she confessed one night. "Really see the ocean, not just in photos. But you know, honey, the life I had here, in this simple house, with you all, was worth more than any trip." These confessions created an even deeper intimacy, as if we were stripping away all social layers to reveal only the pure essence of who we were. There was one specific Sunday that remained marked in my soul. Mom woke up with more energy than she'd had in recent months. "Let's make the cornmeal cake," she announced with that smile I hadn't seen in weeks. We went into the kitchen together, and it was like going back in time. She guided me through the recipe, correcting when I added too much sugar, approving when I got the batter consistency right. The house filled again with that wonderful aroma of baking cornmeal. When the cake was ready, we sat at the table and ate in silence, savoring not just the taste, but the moment. Tears streamed down my face, and she wiped them with her apron. "This smell will stay with you forever," she whispered. "Every time you smell it, I'll be here." Family stories gained new urgency. Mom started pulling old boxes from the closet, showing old letters she exchanged with my grandmother, yellowed photos of people I barely knew, objects that carried decades of memories. Each item came with a narrative, as if she was passing me not just objects, but a complete legacy. "Your grandmother wore this brooch at her wedding," she'd tell, holding a simple piece of jewelry. "She passed it to me, and now it's yours. It's not worth money, but it's worth history." I understood she was preparing me, equipping me with strong roots to face the world without her. The Essence de Fleur perfume was running out in the bottle. I noticed with horror that she was using less and less, saving it. I ran to all the neighborhood stores looking for more, but the brand had stopped manufacturing it. When I told her this, Mom smiled with sweet sadness. "Maybe it's better this way," she said. "If it runs out with me, you won't go looking for this smell everywhere, suffering every time you don't find it." But I didn't agree. I wanted to be able to smell that perfume always, wanted it to last forever. I kept the almost empty bottle as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. The nights were the hardest. Mom had pains that medications could barely control. I stayed beside her bed, holding her hand, singing softly the same songs she sang to me when I was little. We reversed roles, and I became the caregiver. I prepared her teas, adjusted her pillows, told stories to distract her from suffering. In those late nights shared in the dim light, with just the faint glow of the lamp, we created a bubble outside of time. Inside there, the disease didn't exist, only the two of us and the unconditional love that always united us. Dad suffered in silence, in that way men of his generation learned to suffer. He worked longer hours to pay for treatments, came home exhausted, but always with a forced smile for Mom. At night, when he thought no one saw, I'd find him sitting alone in the kitchen, his face in his hands. They had been married for over 30 years. She was his first and only love. The idea of losing her was destroying him inside, but he tried to be strong. "Your father is my rock," Mom told me once. "But even rocks break under enough pressure. Take care of him when I'm no longer here." The last days were a mix of intense presence and silent goodbyes. Mom was sleeping more than she was awake, but when she opened her eyes, they searched for mine. We didn't need words. In one of those moments, she asked for her perfume. I got the almost empty bottle and put a few drops on her neck. The smell spread through the room, and she smiled. "There," she whispered. "Now I'm complete." I held her hand and stayed there, smelling that perfume mixed with hospital smell, recording in memory every second of that moment. There was one night when Mom woke up more lucid, as if she had gathered strength for one last important conversation. She called me close and started talking about life, about love, about loss. "Missing our parents is proof that we loved right," she said with a weak voice. "It's going to hurt, honey. It's going to hurt a lot. But that pain is also love, just with nowhere to go. Don't be afraid of it." She talked about how she wanted me to live afterwards, about not getting stuck in grief, about finding joy even in absence. They were the last great lessons she gave me, delivered in a whisper, but echoing like thunder. On the second to last day, something changed. There was a different quietness in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. Mom barely opened her eyes, but when I spoke, she squeezed my hand lightly. I called Dad and we both stayed there, one on each side of the bed. We told stories about her, remembered happy moments, laughed softly at funny situations from the past. It was our way of saying goodbye, painting in the air a loving portrait of the extraordinary woman she always was. Her perfume still lingered softly in the environment, like a comforting presence. When Mom passed, it was on a Sunday morning. The sun came in softly through the window, and outside the birds sang as if it were an ordinary day. But it wasn't an ordinary day. It was the day my life divided into before and after. I held her hand until the last moment, whispering that everything was okay, that she could go, that I would be fine. But it was a lie. I wasn't fine at all. When I felt her leave, when I realized that hand wouldn't squeeze mine anymore, a piece of me died with her. The smell of perfume was still in the air, but it already seemed weaker, as if it were leaving along with her. The following days were a blur of wake, funeral, people offering condolences that didn't console anything. I returned to the empty house, where every corner screamed her absence. The apron was still hanging in the kitchen. The garden plants were starting to wither without her care. And that perfume, which before permeated the entire house, had completely disappeared. I walked from room to room, desperately trying to find some trace of that smell that defined my mother. I opened closets, smelled clothes, looked for the almost empty bottle I had saved. But it wasn't the same. The perfume needed her to truly exist, and she wasn't there anymore. The house was never the same after Mom left. It's not that we moved furniture around or painted the walls a different color. Everything remained exactly where it always was, but there was a heavy emptiness that occupied every space. It was as if someone had erased the colors from the world, leaving everything in a gray, lifeless tone. I woke up every morning expecting to smell coffee with cinnamon coming from the kitchen, but only found silence and absence. Dad tried to maintain the routine, made breakfast, but the taste was different. It lacked that invisible pinch of love that only she knew how to add to everything she did. The first days were the cruelest because my body hadn't yet understood that she was gone. I caught myself hearing footsteps that didn't exist, waiting for the calming voice to call me from the kitchen, turning my head when I thought I had seen her silhouette on the porch. These small tricks of the brain were knives that twisted in my chest every time. The pain of loss isn't something that comes all at once and that's it. It comes in waves, in random moments that catch you off guard. I could be washing dishes and suddenly remember I'd never see her hands at that sink again, and the crying came without asking permission. The kitchen became the hardest place to enter. There, where so many happy childhood memories happened, now there were only ghosts of moments that wouldn't return. The checkered apron remained hanging on the same hook, but no one had the courage to remove it. It was as if removing it would be admitting definitively that she wouldn't come back to wear it. I tried cooking a few times, mentally following the recipes she taught me, but the food came out tasteless, soulless. Ingredients are just ingredients when they don't have the right hands preparing them. The garden Mom loved so much started to wither. I tried watering the plants like she did, talked to them like I learned watching her, but I didn't have her touch. One by one, the flowers wilted, as if they were also in mourning. Dad looked from the window with teary eyes, watching that garden that was her pride turn into dry earth. "Even the plants miss her," he murmured one day. And it was true. There was a vital energy she brought, a life force that made everything around her flourish. Without her, even nature seemed to give up. The nights were especially lonely. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, mentally reviewing every conversation, every piece of advice, every smile. I was afraid of forgetting. Afraid that one day I wouldn't be able to remember the exact sound of her voice anymore, the precise color of her eyes, the unique way she said my name. So I repeated the memories like mantras, constantly revisiting them to keep them alive. But each time I did this, it seemed they became a little more worn, like old photos that lose their color from being handled so much. Her perfume had completely disappeared from the house. That smell that was so present, so constant, had dissolved into the air like smoke. I opened the closet where she kept her clothes and buried my face in them, desperate for some trace, some remnant of that lavender and vanilla perfume. But I only found the smell of old wood and mothballs. It was devastating. Knowing I'd never smell that aroma that defined my mother again, that was an essential part of who she was. I kept the empty Essence de Fleur bottle in a special box, as if it were a sacred relic. Even empty, it was all that remained of that smell. Dad visibly aged with each passing day. He had lost not just his wife, but the companion of an entire lifetime. I saw him sitting in the rocking chair on the porch where she used to sit, staring at nothing with deep sadness in his eyes. I tried to talk, offer comfort, but he was trapped in an eternal longing that words couldn't reach. Half of me left with her, he told me one night. And I understood perfectly, because I felt the same. We had become half people, trying to function with missing pieces. Special dates were pure torture. Her first birthday without her here was unbearable. Dad and I sat at the table, looking at the empty chair where she always sat. I didn't have the courage to make cake. The simple idea of trying to make the cornmeal cake that was her specialty seemed like a betrayal, a failed attempt to replace the irreplaceable. Dad brought flowers and placed them where her plate would be. We cried together, without shame, without trying to be strong. Because on that day, being weak was the only honest thing we could do. Mother's Day came like a stab. I saw advertisements everywhere about gifts, celebrations, breakfast in bed. Every commercial on TV was a cruel reminder that I no longer had a mother to celebrate. I stayed home, avoiding the world and its happy parties. I took the notebook where I had written the emotional diary of the last months with her and reread every page. Tears stained the ink in some places, but it didn't matter. Those words were bridges to her, were ways of still touching her somehow. Through those written memories, she still breathed. I tried to continue the tradition of making Sunday lunch, but it was impossible. I invited some relatives, prepared the food, set the table. But when everyone sat down and I looked at that empty chair, at that place she always occupied as the family matriarch, I couldn't. I excused myself, went to my room and cried until I had no more tears. The family stories she told, the laughter she provoked, the glue that kept everyone together, all of that was gone. And no one knew how to fill that gigantic space she left. Neighbors came with words of comfort that didn't comfort. She's in a better place, they'd say. Time heals all wounds. But I didn't want her to be in a better place, I wanted her to be here. And time wasn't healing anything, it was just distancing me from her, pushing me away from the last day I saw her, from the last hug, from the last word. Each passing day was one more day without her, and that wasn't healing, it was just accumulation of absence. I started avoiding places we used to go together. The neighborhood store where she bought perfume, the church where we went on Sundays, the square where we walked in the afternoons. Each location was a trap of memories that triggered pain. I saw other mothers with their daughters and felt a bitter envy mixed with sadness. They had what I lost. They could still hug, talk, make plans. I only had memories and a future where she would never be present in the important things still to come. The emotional connection we had was so strong that sometimes I felt I was feeling her pain too, as if there was an echo of suffering that crossed dimensions. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a tight chest, feeling like she was trying to tell me something. I know it sounds crazy, but the love between mother and daughter creates invisible threads that not even death can completely cut. I was desperate for any sign that she still existed somehow, somewhere, and that our bond hadn't been completely destroyed. I kept everything of hers as if they were treasures. The handwritten recipes in a notebook stained with use, the simple earrings she wore, the shawl that covered her shoulders on cold nights, even the soap that still had her mark of use. Each object was a relic that carried a piece of her. I created an altar in my room with a photo of her smiling and these small objects around it. It wasn't religious, it was necessity. I needed a place where she still existed, even if only symbolically. I spent months living on autopilot. Wake up, work, come home, sleep. There was no joy, no plans, no color. The world had become a dull place where I merely existed, but didn't live. Dad was in the same state. We both inhabited that house like two ghosts, trapped in a longing that seemed endless. Friends tried to take me out, get me to socialize. But I didn't want to. I wanted to stay there, in that sadness, because it connected me to Mom. Letting go of the pain seemed like letting go of her. The first year without Mom was the hardest of my entire life. They say there's a grief process, with stages you go through until you reach acceptance. But nobody warns you that these stages aren't linear, that you can be in all of them at the same time, that some days you wake up in anger and go to sleep in denial. I oscillated between moments where I could function reasonably well and moments where I completely fell apart. There was no predictability. A song on the radio, a random smell on the street, someone wearing a similar apron, anything could be the trigger that threw me back into that deep well of pain. I went back to work a few months later because I needed to, but my heart wasn't there. Colleagues looked with pity, asked careful questions about how I was doing, offered that kind of uncomfortable compassion that comes from people who don't know what to say. "I'm fine," I lied. And they accepted the lie with relief because nobody really wants to enter the darkness of another person's grief. It's too scary, too heavy. So I smiled, worked, pretended normalcy. And when I got home, I took off the mask and went back to being the wreck I really was. The memories that moved me started mixing with absurd guilt. I blamed myself for ridiculous things. For that time in adolescence when I talked back. For not visiting more during that month I was busy. For not learning more recipes when I had the chance. The grieving mind is cruel to itself, finds ways to turn every small mistake from the past into an unforgivable sin. I needed professional help to understand this was part of the process, that guilt was a desperate attempt to have control over something that was never in my hands. I started therapy with a psychologist who taught me important things. She explained that grief isn't something you get over and that's it. It's something you learn to carry differently. That I would never stop missing Mom, but that eventually I would learn to live with that absence. It was months of sessions where I cried, screamed, blamed myself, forgave myself, and slowly began to untangle that ball of emotion stuck in my chest. It wasn't a cure. I still don't know if there's a cure for losing a mother, but it was at least understanding. In the second year, something started to change subtly. The pain was still there, always present, but it was no longer that sharp thing that cut every time I breathed. It was more like a dull, constant ache, a weight I carried but that didn't completely paralyze me. I started being able to talk about Mom without immediately falling apart. I started revisiting memories not just as a source of pain, but also of comfort. Remembering Sundays with cornmeal cake still hurt, but now it also brought a warmth in my chest, gratitude for having lived that. Dad was also changing. He started taking care of the garden she loved so much. At first it was a struggle, he didn't know how to care for plants like she did. Many died, but he replanted with stubborn patience. He said it was his way of honoring her memory, of keeping alive something she loved. Seeing those first flowers blooming again was emotional. They didn't bring Mom back, but they showed that life insists on continuing, on flourishing even after the most devastating loss. I tried making the cornmeal cake for the first time 2 years later. I was alone at home, it was a Sunday. I got the notebook with her recipes, found those instructions written in the neat handwriting I knew so well. I followed each step with reverence, as if performing a sacred ritual. When the smell of cake started filling the kitchen, I sat on the floor and cried. But they were different tears. They weren't just of eternal longing, but also of connection. There, in that smell, she was with me again somehow. The recipe was a bridge between us. I met other people who had also lost their mothers. There was a support group I started attending, and there I discovered I wasn't alone in this pain. Hearing stories from other daughters, seeing how each one dealt with maternal absence differently, was liberating. Some kept ashes at home, others visited the cemetery every week, others still talked out loud to their mothers as if they could hear. There was no right or wrong way to live grief. Each one found their own path through the darkness. I started better understanding those last conversations I had with Mom. When she said pain was love with nowhere to go, I didn't fully understand. Now I understood. I had so much love to give her and nowhere to put it. That love transformed into actions. I started volunteering, helping other people, especially elderly women who had no family. It didn't replace Mom, nothing ever would. But it channeled that orphaned love to places where it could make a difference. It was my way of honoring who she was. Her birthdays became easier to face. In the 3rd year, I managed to have a small celebration. I invited Dad and some close relatives, we made her favorite lunch, told funny stories. We laughed remembering the peculiar things she did, the quirks only she had. It was sweet to be able to celebrate who she was without being completely devastated by absence. I understood she would live forever in the stories we told, in the traditions we kept, in the love we passed forward. I found a letter Mom had written to me and hidden among her things. It was addressed for my daughter to read when the longing gets too strong. I discovered it 3 years after her death, on an especially difficult day. The words were her talking about how she saw me, about the pride she felt, about how she wanted me to live afterwards. "Don't get stuck in the past with me," she wrote. "Live. Love. Be happy. That's the best way to honor me." That letter was a gift she left for the future, knowing I would need those words exactly when I found them. Slowly, I learned to live in a new normal. A normal where Mom wasn't physically present, but where her influence permeated everything. I made decisions thinking about what she would teach me, faced challenges remembering the strength she demonstrated. The stories of overcoming she told about her own life became my resilience manual. When I thought I couldn't continue, I remembered she grew up without a mother, worked from an early age, built a family with love and dignity. If she could do it, so could I. The narrated stories channel I started listening to helped me a lot. They were short real stories about people who lost loved ones and found ways to continue. The soft female narration had something comforting about it, almost maternal. I'd listen before bed, and those voices telling emotional tales made me feel less alone. I discovered that loss is universal. Everyone loses people they love. Everyone faces the devastating emptiness of absence. But everyone also finds ways to continue, to rebuild, to find meaning again. I learned that missing our parents will never completely go away, and that's okay. It doesn't need to go away. I can carry this longing like I carry love, they're two sides of the same coin. The intensity changed, The way it affects my daily life changed, but the essence remains. I still miss her every day. I still wish I could call and tell her about everyday things. I still look at the empty chair and feel that pang in my chest. But now I can also smile remembering her, be grateful for having had the luck of having such a special mother. The fourth year brought a serenity I didn't expect. It wasn't complete happiness, maybe it will never be again in that carefree way from before. But it was peace. A deep acceptance that life is made of arrivals and departures, of seasons that begin and end, of people we love intensely and then need to learn to love through memory. Mom taught me so much about love while she was alive. Now, through her absence, I was learning about permanence. About how true love doesn't die when the person dies. It just transforms. It was a completely ordinary Tuesday, one of those that promises nothing beyond routine. I woke up, had coffee, went to work, came home. Nothing in the day signaled that something extraordinary was about to happen. After 5 years since Mom's passing, I had learned to live with her absence. Not that the pain had disappeared, but I had found a way to function, to move forward carrying that constant weight in my chest. I was heading home when I decided to stop by the neighborhood bakery to buy fresh bread for dinner. A simple decision, trivial even. No idea that moment would change everything. Santo Antonio Bakery was 2 blocks from home, an old establishment that had been there since before I was born. Mom used to buy bread there every week. I avoided the place precisely because of that, there were too many memories. But that day, without thinking much, I pushed the glass door and entered. The place had that characteristic smell of warm bread fresh from the oven, mixed with brewed coffee. There were some people in line, and I waited my turn, looking distractedly at the breads in the display case. I was thinking about mundane things, the shopping list I needed to make, the bill I had to pay. My mind occupied with daily trivialities. That's when an elderly woman passed by me coming from the back of the bakery. She just passed. A simple, ordinary movement that in any other context would be completely insignificant. But then it reached me. The smell. That impossible, unmistakable smell I hadn't smelled in 5 years. Lavender mixed with vanilla, exactly in those unique proportions. My mother's perfume. The essence de fleur that had stopped being manufactured. My whole body froze. My heart started beating erratically. For a second, the entire world stopped spinning. I turned my head quickly, looking for the source of that smell. The lady was already leaving the bakery, an older woman with gray hair, carrying a bag of bread. It wasn't my mother, obviously. My mother had passed 5 years ago. I knew that. My rational side knew that. But in that moment, just with that smell invading my nostrils, my heart didn't know anything. My heart was screaming that she was there, that she had come back, that everything had been just a long nightmare from which I was finally waking up. Tears came instantly, without asking permission. I left the line without buying anything and ran outside. The lady was already crossing the street, moving away. I stood there on the sidewalk, trembling, with my hands covering my face, trying to process what had just happened. That smell. How was it possible? The perfume had stopped being manufactured years ago. I had looked in dozens of stores, had even consulted distributors. It simply didn't exist anymore. And yet, I had just smelled that exact aroma crossing space and time to find me there, at that bakery, on that ordinary Tuesday. People on the street looked at me with curiosity and concern. A middle-aged woman standing on the sidewalk, crying uncontrollably. It must have seemed strange, maybe even scary. But I couldn't care what they thought. I was too busy being transported through time. For a few magical seconds, while that smell still lingered fresh in my olfactory memory, I was 9 years old again. I was in the kitchen with Mom, helping make Sunday cake. She was alive, healthy, smiling while teaching me to stir the batter. Her checkered apron. Her delicate hands. Her voice humming softly. Then the memory dissipated, and I was brutally back to reality. To the sidewalk of Santo Antonio Bakery. To the dull Tuesday. To the life where my mother was no longer. The transition was painful, like being ripped from a good dream. But something had changed. Inside my chest, there was a strange feeling, kind of confused, that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just sadness or longing. It was something more complex. It was as if I had received a message, a sign, proof that what exactly? I didn't know. I was still processing. I went back into the bakery, this time with purpose. I needed to ask. I needed to understand. I got to the counter and the attendant, a young woman who had worked there for years, recognized me. "Are you okay?" she asked with genuine concern. It must have been obvious I was far from okay. "That lady who just left," I began with a trembling voice. "Does she always come here? Do you know who she is?" The girl thought for a moment. "Oh, Donna Celeste? Yes, she's a long-time customer. Comes almost every day to buy fresh bread." "Why? Donna Celeste." The name meant nothing to me, but the fact that she came almost every day was significant. Could it be that I had passed near this moment of reunion with my mother's smell several times without knowing? "How long has she been a customer?" I asked. The attendant shrugged. "Since always, I think. Since before I worked here, certainly." My mind was working fast. This meant this Donna Celeste was buying bread at this same bakery when Mom also bought bread. They may have crossed paths. They may have talked. They may have shared that space without me ever knowing. I left the bakery with more questions than answers. I walked home slowly, still feeling the echo of that perfume in my cells. It wasn't just a smell. It was an emotional connection crossing dimensions. It was the past touching the present. It was Mom, in some impossible and inexplicable way, saying I'm here. For 5 years, I lived with that emptiness of her. With the certainty I'd never feel that specific presence only she had again. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, at a neighborhood bakery, the universe conspired to show me something. I got home and sat on the couch, still in shock. Dad was watching television and noticed my state. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. And then I told him. Told about the bakery, about the lady, about the impossible perfume that resurfaced from nowhere. As I spoke, tears came back, but now they were different tears. They weren't just of sadness. There was something of joy mixed in there. Something of wonder. Dad listened in silence, and when I finished, I saw tears in his eyes too. "She's telling you she never really left," he whispered. The night of that day was different from all other nights of the last 5 years. I lay in bed not with the habitual weight of grief, but with a strange feeling of lightness. As if I had received permission to believe in something bigger. I closed my eyes and could smell that scent again, now recorded in high definition in my memory. It wasn't imagination. It had been real. As real as anything I've ever experienced. And if that was real, then maybe there are things in this universe we don't understand. Maybe love is strong enough to cross whatever separates the living from the dead. In the following days, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I told my therapist, expecting her to say something rational about coincidences and the mind seeking patterns. But she surprised me. "Sometimes," she said calmly, The universe gives us exactly what we need when we need it. It doesn't need to make logical sense. It just needs to be true for you. And it was true. Truer than anything I'd lived in the last 5 years. That smell had pierced the veil of reality and delivered a piece of my mother back to me. I started passing by Santo Antonio Bakery more frequently. Not every day, I didn't want to force anything, didn't want to ruin the magic with anxious expectation. But a few times a week, I'd stop by. Sometimes I saw Donna Celeste. Sometimes I didn't. When I saw her, that perfume came with her, and each time was like an invisible hug crossing time. I never had the courage to approach the lady, to ask about the perfume. I was afraid of breaking the spell. Afraid of discovering something mundane that would destroy the magic of the moment. What happened at that bakery changed something fundamental inside me. Before, Mom was past. She was memory, photograph, eternal longing for something that wouldn't return. After that day, she became present too. Not physically, not in a way I could touch or see. But in a more subtle and perhaps even more powerful way. She was in impossible synchronicities. She was in the signs the universe sent. She was in that perfume that defied logic and probability to find me exactly when I most needed to be reminded that love never dies. My body reacted before my mind could process. It was instinctive, primitive even. My legs buckled and I needed to lean on the glass counter of the bakery not to fall. My heart raced in a chaotic rhythm, as if trying to jump out of my chest. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. It was as if every cell in my body had recognized something my consciousness was still trying to comprehend. That smell wasn't just a perfume. It was Mom. It was all of her materialized in an impossible fragrance that invaded my senses and crumbled all the defenses I'd built over the last 5 years. Tears came before I could even think to hold them back. They weren't delicate tears streaming silently. They were deep sobs coming from a place so deep inside me I didn't even know existed. It was as if all the accumulated grief, all the stored pain, all the eternal longing I tried to manage and control had found a crack to escape. There, in the middle of Santo Antonio Bakery, surrounded by strangers buying bread, I completely fell apart. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't try to hold it in. I let that overwhelming emotion consume me completely. People around me started to notice. I saw in passing expressions of concern. Someone asked if I was okay, a voice offered help. But I was so immersed in that moment I barely registered. My reality had reduced to a single thing, that smell of lavender and vanilla that brought Mom back in such a visceral way it seemed impossible. I closed my eyes and for a glorious instant, she was there. I couldn't see her with physical eyes, but I felt her presence as clearly as I felt my own heart beating erratically. It was her. I knew. My whole body knew. The sensation was simultaneously devastating and healing. Devastating because it reopened that wound I thought was healing. 5 years building a life without her, 5 years learning to function with the emptiness, 5 years convincing myself I was overcoming. And then, in a second, all of that crumbled. But it was also healing because, for the first time since she passed, I felt there was a real connection. It wasn't just memory, it wasn't just a faded photograph in my mind. It was something palpable, present, alive. It was proof that some connections are too strong to be cut by death. My hands automatically went to my face, covering my mouth in a gesture trying to contain what couldn't be contained. Tears streamed between my fingers. My nose was running. I was a complete mess and I didn't even care. In that moment, all the composure I maintained for years, all the social masks I wore to seem like I was okay, simply evaporated. I went back to being that desperate daughter who lost her mother. I went back to being that girl who just wanted one more hug, one more conversation, one more moment with the woman who defined what unconditional love meant. The smell still lingered in the air, but was already starting to dissipate. That made me even more desperate. No, it can't go away so quickly, I thought. I need to keep this, I need to make it last. I breathed deeply, trying to inhale every molecule of that perfume, trying to record with even more intensity in memory. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. The more I squeezed, the more it slipped away. The perfume grew weaker, being gradually replaced by the smell of bread and coffee from the bakery. And when it was finally completely gone, I felt like I had lost Mom for the second time. But something remained. A deep, unshakable certainty that installed itself in the center of my chest like an anchor. She was there. She had never really left. For 5 years, I thought death had created an insurmountable barrier between us. That she was somewhere distant, unreachable, and I was here, alone, carrying only memories. But in that moment, with that impossible perfume arising from nowhere on an ordinary Tuesday, I understood something that changed everything. The people we love don't completely leave. They remain in signs, in impossible coincidences, in moments that defy logic. I opened my eyes and looked around the bakery as if seeing the place for the first time. People continued their normal lives, buying bread, drinking coffee, talking. No one had any idea of the miracle that had just happened. For them, it was just another boring afternoon at a neighborhood bakery. But for me, the entire world had changed. That space had become sacred. There, on that common ceramic floor, between bread shelves and glass counters, my mother had found a way to reach me. To tell me, "I'm here, honey. I always was. I always will be." The attendant approached with a glass of water. "Here, drink this," she said with genuine kindness. I accepted with still trembling hands and drank a few sips. The simple gesture of kindness from a stranger brought me back to practical reality. I needed to pull myself together, needed to leave before making an even bigger scene. But at the same time, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay there, in that place where the miracle happened, where for a few blessed seconds the veil between worlds became thin enough to let my mother's smell through. As if leaving would break the connection, destroy the magic. I forced my feet to move. Each step toward the door seemed wrong, as if I was moving away from something precious. But I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The world kept spinning, life kept demanding I function, fulfill obligations, move forward. But now it was different. Now I carried with me the certainty I wasn't alone. That Mom, in some way that transcended my understanding, was still present. Not the way she was when alive, but in a new, more subtle way that required me to pay attention to details, to signs, to impossible synchronicities. I walked home in an almost meditative state. My mind was quiet for the first time in years. There wasn't the constant noise of anxious thoughts, worries, ruminating sadness. There was just a strange peace, a deep acceptance of something bigger. The familiar streets of the neighborhood seemed different. The trees seemed greener. The sky seemed wider. It was as if that encounter with Mom's smell had cleaned something inside me, opening space for a new way of perceiving the world. A way that included possibilities I would have previously dismissed as superstition or magical thinking. When I got home and told Dad, I saw in his eyes that he understood completely. He didn't question, didn't try to rationalize, didn't suggest it had been imagination or coincidence. He just held my hands and said, "She always said she would find ways to be present." And it was true. In one of those last conversations before passing, Mom had said something like that. At the time, I thought it was just talk from someone trying to comfort those who would stay. but now I understood it was a promise. And she had kept it. That night, I wrote everything in my emotional diary. Every detail, every sensation, every thought. I wanted to preserve that moment in its totality, capture not just the facts but the essence of the experience. I wrote about how my body reacted, about the uncontrollable tears, about the certainty that installed itself in my chest. I wrote about how, for the first time in 5 years, I felt I had received an answer to the question I silently carried: do you still exist somewhere? Do you still care about me? Are you still somehow connected to me? And the answer had come in the form of an impossible perfume at a neighborhood bakery. In the following days, that experience continued reverberating inside me. It wasn't something that happened and passed. It was something that happened and remained, fundamentally changing how I saw life, death, and everything that exists between these two states. I started paying more attention to things I would have previously ignored. A specific song playing at the exact moment I was thinking about Mom. A butterfly landing on my window on her birthday. Small signs that, individually, I could dismiss as coincidence. But collectively, they formed a pattern, a secret language the universe used to tell me I wasn't alone. I talked to other people who lost loved ones and discovered many had similar experiences. Stories that touch the heart about impossible signs, about perfumes that arise from nowhere, about dreams so vivid they seemed like real visits. There was a whole world of experiences our rational society tends to ignore or dismiss. But for those who live these experiences, they're more real than anything. They're bridges between worlds, messages of love that cross barriers we thought were absolute. And I was no longer willing to dismiss these experiences as illusion or unconscious desire. They were real. As real as anything in this physical world. The experience at the bakery taught me something fundamental: true love knows no limits. It's not contained by distance, by time, or even by death. The love Mom had for me, that unconditional love that shaped me, that sustained me, that defined me, that love continued existing. It hadn't disappeared when she passed. It had just changed form, transformed into something less tangible but no less powerful. And sometimes, in moments of grace, that love found ways to manifest. To remind me that the bonds between mother and daughter are eternal, indestructible, sacred. That day at Santo Antonio Bakery was a watershed in my journey through grief. Before, I carried Mom's absence like a dead weight, like something that had ended and would never return. After, I started understanding that physical absence doesn't mean complete absence. There's a form of presence that transcends the body, that goes beyond what we can touch or see. It's a presence that manifests in signs, in synchronicities, in impossible moments that make us stop and recognize, there's more mystery in this universe than our rational mind can process. And it's okay not to understand completely. It's okay to just accept and be grateful. I started living differently after that encounter with the impossible perfume. I paid more attention to daily details, to the small miracles that happen constantly but we ignore because we're too busy or too skeptical. I saw Mom in everything now. In the way afternoon light came through the kitchen window, creating that same golden pattern she loved. In the little bird that started appearing in the garden every day at the same time, as if fulfilling a mission. In moments when, out of nowhere, I caught myself humming a song she used to sing. They were subtle signs, easy to dismiss as coincidence. But I chose to see them for what they really were, messages of love. Understanding that love doesn't die brought a freedom I didn't expect. For years, I lived imprisoned in sadness, as if carrying this pain was the only way to honor Mom. As if being happy meant forgetting her, betraying her memory. But after that experience at the bakery, I understood the opposite was true. Being happy, living fully, embracing life with all its beauty and complexity, that was honoring who she was. She wouldn't have wanted to see me stuck in eternal grief. She would have wanted me to live, to love, to create my own story. And now I had permission to do that without guilt. The family stories Mom told gained new meaning. They weren't just narratives about the past, but teachings about permanence. About how the people we love continue existing through the stories we tell about them, through the values they transmitted to us, through the lessons they taught us. Every time I told someone about her cornmeal cake, about the garden she cultivated, about conversations on the porch, I kept her alive. Not in the physical way I'd like, but in a way that honored who she was and the impact she had on the world through me. I went back to making cornmeal cake regularly. It was no longer emotional torture, but a ritual of connection. Every time I separated the ingredients, mentally following the recipe she taught me, I felt her presence. Every time the smell filled the kitchen, it was as if she was there with me, approving, smiling, satisfied that her legacy continued. I started inviting people to eat the cake, sharing not just the food but the stories that came with it. And so, Mom touched the lives of people who never knew her. Her love multiplied, expanded, reached places she never imagined in life. The garden Dad resurrected became a sanctuary. We planted new flowers, cared for them with dedication, talked to the plants exactly as she did. And the garden responded, flourishing in ways we didn't even expect. It was as if her energy still permeated that earth, still nourished those roots. I spent time there every week, sitting on the same bench where she used to sit, feeling the sun on my face, listening to the birds. In these moments of quietness, I felt a deep peace. As if that space was a portal where the line between worlds became thinner, where I could almost touch the place where she was. I learned that eternal longing doesn't have to be just pain. It can also be love in its purest form. When I miss Mom now, and I do, I always will. I recognize that feeling as evidence that I loved and was loved truly. Not everyone has the luck to experience a love as deep as what we had. So, instead of just lamenting the loss, I also learned to be grateful for the privilege of having had it. 5, 10, 50 years, it would never be enough time with someone we love like that. But the time we had was precious, was transformative, was enough to shape who I became. My mother's memories stopped being just sources of sadness and also became sources of strength. When I face challenges, I ask, what would Mom do? When I need courage, I remember the stories of overcoming she told about her own life. When I feel alone, I close my eyes and transport myself to our kitchen, to Sunday cakes, to conversations on the porch. She gave me enough tools for a lifetime. Even physically absent, she continues being my mentor, my guide, my source of wisdom. Death took her body but couldn't take what really mattered, her love, her teachings, her essence. Today, when I pass by Santo Antonio Bakery, I always go in. Even if I don't need bread, I go in. That place is sacred to me now. It's where the universe conspired to show me that love is eternal, that the connection between mother and daughter can't be broken by something as trivial as physical death. Sometimes I see Donna Celeste, and when I do, that perfume is still there. Each time is a renewed blessing, a reminder I'm not alone. That Mom, in some mysterious and beautiful way, still finds ways to reach me, to hug me, to tell me everything's okay. I understood that life is made of arrivals and departures, but true love remains. It transforms, changes form, but doesn't disappear. Mom is no longer here in the physical sense, but she's in every choice I make based on the values she taught me. She's in the recipes I prepare, in the stories I tell, in the love I pass forward. She's in silent moments when I feel a comforting presence I can't explain. She's in the impossible signs the universe sends when I need to be reminded I don't walk alone through this world. Childhood nostalgia now comes tinged not just with sadness, but also with gratitude. I was blessed with an extraordinary mother who loved me unconditionally, who taught me about strength and gentleness, who showed me it's possible to flourish even in difficult circumstances. Many people spend their entire lives without experiencing that kind of love. I had it. And nothing, not death, not time, not distance, can erase that. These childhood memories are my most precious treasure, the foundation upon which I built everything I am. And now I know they're not just memories of the past, but living bridges that connect me to her in the present. I share my story whenever I meet someone going through the grief of losing their mother or father. I tell about the day at the bakery, about the impossible perfume, about the certainty I gained that love transcends everything. Not to convince anyone of anything, but to offer the same comfort I received: you're not alone. The people we love don't completely leave. They remain in ways that sometimes are too subtle for logic, but too evident for the heart to ignore. We just need to be open, attentive, willing to believe there's more in heaven and earth than our philosophy can explain. Today, I can say something I couldn't say 5 years ago: I'm at peace. Not because I don't miss her anymore, I always will. Not because the pain completely disappeared, it still hurts, it just hurts differently. But because I understood that death isn't the end of everything. It's just a transformation. Mom continues existing, just on a different frequency. And sometimes, in moments of grace like that one at the bakery, these frequencies align enough to create a moment of contact, a second of reconnection that's worth more than 1,000 words. The legacy she left isn't made of material things. It's made of love, of memories, of lessons about how to live with dignity and an open heart. It's made of recipes I pass forward, of stories I tell, of values I carry. She lives through me now. Every time I choose kindness over anger, every time I prepare food with love, every time I look at a garden and see beauty, she's there. I became the guardian of her memory, but more than that, I became the continuation of her story. And this story doesn't end. It expands, touches other lives, creates waves that go beyond what I can see. So yes, Mom left in the physical sense. But believing she never really left? That's not illusion or denial. It's the deepest truth I know. The smell at the bakery was just confirmation of what my heart already knew: true love is eternal. It knows no borders, doesn't obey the laws of physics, doesn't surrender to death. The love we had, that we have, that we'll always have, that love is the only truly immortal thing in this world. And as long as I breathe, as long as my heart beats, she'll be here with me. Different, but present. Physically absent, but eternally alive where it really matters, inside me. Now I want to hear from you who's listening. Did this story touch your heart? Did you identify with any part of what I told? Because I know I'm not alone in this pain. I know there are thousands of daughters and sons out there who also lost their mothers, their fathers, and carry this eternal longing in their chest every day. Tell me, have you also smelled your mother after she passed? Have you had some impossible moment where you felt she was there, present, telling you everything's okay? Was it a perfume that arose from nowhere? Was it a song that played at the exact moment? Was it a dream so real you woke up with certainty it was a visit? Share here in the comments. I want to read every story, every experience, every sign you received. Because these stories connect us, show us we're not alone in this journey through loss and longing. And if you lost your father, have you smelled that aftershave only he used? That smell of cigarettes, or coffee, or that old cologne that was his trademark? Signs come in different forms for each of us, but they all carry the same message: love never dies. Tell me also, do you believe that people we love find ways to send us signs? Or do you think they're just coincidences, tricks of our mind desperate for comfort? Be honest, there's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to understand how you see these things, how you deal with the absence of those you love. For you who still have your mother alive, did this video make you value moments with her more? Did it make you want to call now, hug tighter, say the things we sometimes leave for later? Because that's one of the biggest lessons I learned: don't leave it for later. Don't save words of love, hugs, moments. Life is too fragile, and we never know how much time we really have. And if you're going through grief now, if you lost your mother recently and you're in that impossible pain that seems like it will never pass, I want you to know, you'll survive. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but you'll find ways to continue. And one day, when you least expect it, she'll send you a sign. It might be a smell, it might be a song, it might be a bird, it might be a dream. Stay alert. Stay open. Because love finds ways to cross even the impossible. Thank you for staying here with me until the end of this story. Thank you for letting me share the most precious thing I have, my mother's memories and the certainty she never really left. If this story touched you in some way, if it made you feel something, if it made you remember someone you love or once loved, leave your comment down below. Let's create together a space where stories that touch the heart can be shared without fear, where pain can be expressed, where love can be celebrated even in absence. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now and turn on notification bells. Every week I bring real stories like this, sad and beautiful stories, stories of overcoming, emotional tales narrated with this calming voice you already know. They're real-life stories from people like you and me, who lived, loved, lost, and found ways to continue. They're stories about mothers, fathers, grandparents, lost loves, old letters found, emotional diaries that reveal secrets kept for decades. This is a narrated stories channel where you'll always find something that touches your soul, that makes you feel less alone, that reminds you what really matters in this life. Don't miss the next videos. Every story here is a tribute to love, to memory, to the emotional connections that define us as human beings. See you in the next video, with another story that goes straight to the heart. Until then, take care of those you love. Hug tight. Say the words you need to say. Because one day all that will remain are the memories that move us and the certainty we love truly. A kiss to each of your hearts. Until the next story.